Hello, I'm Michael Tracy. Today I'm going to cover how California's daily overtime requirement to pay overtime after 8 hours in a day interacts with the requirement to pay 40 hours in a week. And this is a common area of confusion. It stems from the statute itself, California Labor Code 510, which says 8 hours of labor constitutes a day's work. Any work in excess of 8 hours in one work day and any work in excess of 40 hours in any one work week. And the first 8 hours worked on the seventh day of work in any one work week shall be compensated at the rate of no less than 1.5 times the regular rate of pay for an employee. That sentence seems to imply that you get both daily overtime and weekly overtime. That is overtime for hours worked past 40 in a week. And that's of the plain reading of the statute. The issue is that a few sentences down, there's another section that clarifies exactly what California law is on this subject. And that section reads, nothing in this section requires an employer to combine more than one rate of overtime compensation in order to calculate the amount to be paid to an employee for any hour of overtime work. So that second sentence that I read is not as clear-cut as the first, but that's why attorneys get paid the big bucks, because we read a sentence and say it means something that maybe is not entirely clear. So although the first section says that you get overtime after work in excess of 8 hours in one workday and any work in excess of 40 hours in one work week, the other section that says you cannot combine, the employer is not required to combine more than one rate of overtime compensation, means that you don't get both daily overtime and weekly overtime. That is, when you work an hour, 9 hours in a day, that's 1 hour of overtime, 8 hours of straight time, 1 hour of overtime. That hour of overtime does not count towards the 40 hours in the week. And that's what that second section means. So let's work through a couple examples of how this is applicable to standard schedules. This is a spreadsheet of a schedule of 10-hour days starting on the work week starts on Sunday. They work Monday 10 hours, Tuesday 10 hours, Wednesday 10 hours, Thursday 10 hours. And the overtime is being paid after 8 hours a day. So they get 8 hours of straight time and 2 hours of daily overtime. The question that I so frequently get asked is, now that they come in on Friday, they've already worked 40 hours in the week. They've been paid, the calculation has been, 8 hours, 36 hours, 32 hours of straight time and 8 hours. But since they've already worked the 40 hours in the week and the statute says and 40 hours in a week, does overtime immediately start if you just start on Friday and you come in and you work 4 hours? Do you get the daily overtime? The answer is no, because of the no credit clause, or the credit clause. That is, because the hour was previously paid as overtime, it does not count towards the 40 hours in the week for the weekly overtime. So for this day, if you work 10 hours, you get 8 hours and 2 hours, but the overtime doesn't kick in until either after 40 straight time hours in the week or 8 hours in a day. So let's look at another example. Let's say we worked 9 hours a day, and here we are at 36 hours for the week on Friday, and we come into work and work just 4 hours. No overtime would be due there because it's not over 8 hours in a day. And even if we exceeded that and we work 9 hours on the Friday, you would only get 1 hour of overtime because of the daily overtime requirement to pay overtime after 8 hours in one day. So there's additional rules for work on the seventh day. We don't have that in this particular situation, but even here, now we see that our total straight time is 40 hours. So on Saturday, which is the 6th day of work, even though it's the 7th day in this week, when we work 5 hours of overtime, you can see that it comes in as weekly overtime because it's in excess of the 40 hours of straight time in the week, and that's because the California statute says that you don't get to use the overtime that was paid to you under the daily overtime provision in calculating whether you're entitled to that weekly overtime. So I hope that clears up the confusion. I get asked this question very frequently, It is a very common misconception that people read the statute and they see 8 hours and 40 hours, but they don't read that second sentence down lower that says you can't combine the two, or you're not required. If the employer wants to, the employer is always allowed to pay more than the law requires. But California law, because of that second sentence, gives the employer a credit for any overtime that it has already paid you, and you do not get paid the weekly overtime until you have worked 40 straight time hours in the week. So, thank you.